Welcome back to West Virginia Gun Law. I'm Attorney Todd Leneve. The 2026 West Virginia legislative session just wrapped up last weekend, March 14th, and while a number of gun bills were introduced this year, there were a few that I wanted to take a look at with you here today. So let's jump into that. Stick around. House Bill 4106 is probably the highlight legislation this year because it is the bill that gave constitutional carry or permitless carry rights to 18 to 20-year-old adults. Now, previously, 18 to 20-year-olds could get a provisional concealed handgun license, or CHL, which would allow them to carry after taking the same training program that adults have to go through 21 or older in order to get a concealed handgun license. So while that provisional CHL had some limitations that you don't have as a 21 and over adult, it did still give 18 to 20-year-olds the ability to carry concealed. Now HB 4106 has eliminated that requirement and says, hey, we're going to treat all adults the same, and we're going to allow 18 to 20-year-old adults also carry without the need for a permit if they would choose to not get a permit. So the effect of HB 4106 was that West Virginia Code Section 61-7-3, which was previously the law that was used to prohibit 18 to 20-year-olds from carrying without a permit, has now been repealed. And as of the effective date of this law, which will be sometime probably in June, then that section of code will no longer be in effect, and 18 and up adults will be allowed to carry under constitutional provisions, meaning you don't have to have a permit or a license to have done so. Now, I am a firm proponent of going out and training with your firearm, getting good quality training, because I think it's critical for anybody who is going to carry for personal protection, not just to go off half-cocked. No pun intended, or maybe it was. But bottom line is that training is a really important aspect of carrying a firearm. It's an important part of being able to protect yourself from liability claims for having used that firearm. But the Second Amendment is very clear. Those rights shall not be infringed. And HB 4106 this year went a great distance towards correcting something that I think has been a terrible wrong to the 18 to 20-year-old class for a number of years. So as I said, I think that was really the highlight of this legislative session from a standpoint of significant changes. Now the next bill, which I think is very significant, is Senate Bill 800. Senate Bill 800 was introduced with the idea of fixing a glitch, essentially, within the FBI's NICS system for people who had a criminal conviction in their past, but were able to get an expungement through the courts. Historically, I never ran into problems with that with any of my clients who got an expungement. They were then able to go out and make a firearms purchase at a firearms dealership and had no issues whatsoever. However, about a year and a half ago, I started getting phone calls from people who had had expungements done by other attorneys and were still unable to buy a firearm. And what it came down to is that the FBI's NICS unit was saying that if a person's right to sit on a jury, their basic civil rights, were not restored previously, the simple fact of an expungement wasn't enough for them to have their name removed from the prohibited list. Once again, government here to help us, I guess. It's absolutely ridiculous that if this is something that actually mattered to them, it was only recently really starting to be enforced. But that is the simple reality. So fortunately, a group of legislators this year said, hey, we're going to fix that glitch in the system by introducing Senate Bill 800, which is essentially a law that qualifies who is able to sit on a civil or criminal jury in the state of West Virginia. And while previously folks who had been convicted of crimes involving dishonesty, fraud, or misrepresentation, things like that, or had been convicted of felony offenses, were prohibited from serving on a jury. Now with Senate Bill 800, a clear path is provided that allows those folks who have had a conviction in their past, have had an expungement granted, or were granted a pardon by the governor's office, are now qualified to sit on a jury. And by making that little change in the law regarding jury service eligibility, we now have managed to overcome the FBI's NICS objection to people who have an expungement but did not have an express restoration of their rights to sit on a jury. And so that's another pretty significant development for people who did have a conviction in the past, but one that would be eligible to be considered for expungement. Now we can go to court, we can seek the expungement, and because of the wording here in Senate Bill 800, we are able to now say, hey, there should be zero impediment to you being able to move forward with making a lawful purchase through an FFL if you would choose to do so. So those were two pretty significant ones. The third one that I wanted to talk about was House Bill 4169, which was a bill that I worked on with a good friend of mine, Delegate Ian Masters, from over in the Eastern Panhandle of West Virginia. 4169 was aimed at making it a little bit easier for people who had previously gone through a mental hygiene or involuntary commitment for mental health purposes to bounce back with getting their names unlisted in the state's Central Mental Health Registry. So one of the prohibiting factors from buying a firearm is for people who have been involuntarily committed or who have been adjudicated, judged by a court to be mentally incompetent or deficient. And even if that was just a temporary thing, maybe a rough patch that somebody was going through, once your name was sent to the state's Central Mental Health Registry, it stays there. And while it's a state-level disability, the NICS unit will honor that state disability when somebody applies for a firearms purchase. And when they run the background check, they'll see the person's name shows up in the registry, and at that point that sale is denied. So historically, the way the laws have worked is that the law that allows you to be committed involuntarily provides a big long list of mental health professionals who can give the opinion that you in fact need to be committed. While the law, the statute regarding restoration of your rights after you've regained your competence is limited to just two classes of professionals, psychiatrists and psychologists. Well, that can be pretty challenging to find somebody who's willing to work with us to do the kind of updated mental health assessment that's required to go with a petition to the courts to have your rights restored after a mental hygiene event somewhere in your history. So now under 4169, the list of people who can get you committed will mirror the list of people who can help you get removed from that list. So it just makes it a little bit easier if you're in that situation for us to find an appropriate professional who can sit with you, do a new assessment, and file an assessment for us that we submit to the court that says this person is no longer a danger to themselves or others and is capable of safely and responsibly exercising their Second Amendment rights. So those were the three that I wanted to talk about today. Nothing hugely exciting, but the constitutional carry provision and fixing the glitch regarding jury service to me are really big developments that, from a legal standpoint, maybe a little nerdy side of things here, is kind of exciting because I know that it's going to expand a lot of opportunities for folks who have been kind of hamstrung by the law up to this point. Of course, we had a number of other bills that were introduced, big one being the machine gun bill, Senate Bill 1071, that fell a little short this year, or a lot short this year, and hopefully it's going to come back next year. But these were three that I thought were worth taking a minute to talk with you about. If you have any questions about them, any comments on the ideas that are represented by these three statutes, please feel free to drop them in the comments section below. Would love to hear what you guys have to say. And again, appreciate you spending a few minutes with me here today. Would love to have you subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and enjoy having you come along for the ride here with us. Thanks again, I appreciate it, and we will see you probably next week. And until then, I hope you take care and are able to stay safe.